So welcome back, and please give a warm welcome to Afsaneh Salari, the director of this beautiful film. It's a pleasure having you here. So, as I announced before, there is a beautiful microphone in case you want to join our conversation or ask questions. Please just use the mic. You are very welcome to do so. I'm going to start with some questions, as I do have many. So first of all, to say it again, we already had a film by you last year at the festival. It's so nice to have you here this year. That's fantastic. But last year and this year, both films are about Afghans descendants in Iran and how their life looks like. So why is this topic in particular so dear to you, and where does your interest come from?
First of all, hi everyone. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday afternoon in this room to watch the silhouettes. As you see also in the film, Afghan community is quite isolated from the rest of the community in Iran. We don't really exchange that much, and they really stay within their community, and also from the Iranian, let's say, host society, there's also not much enthusiasm to want to have any connection or any exchange with Afghan community. And I was also part of that host society for years, living through the same ignorance toward Afghans, until I moved to Europe myself when I was 21 years old to study. And I started to experience life as a second-class citizen as well. I look different, so I'm quickly singled out in the streets of Paris, in my university. And you start to have some new questions and some emotions even about what's your position in that society and how does it feel to come from a faraway land. And this sensitized me a little bit to this question of racism and discrimination in general. However, I have never been discriminated during my life in France, but still the emotions are very similar. So I decided that I want to do something in Iran with Afghans, but I was very interested in second generation, who is born and raised in Iran, who's like basically, they are supposed to be Iranian because they know the culture, they know the language, they've never been to the land of their parents. But then the second generation particularly was interesting for me because they didn't experience flight from Afghanistan. They didn't flee from Afghanistan, so their experience was different from that of their parents. But then they could not be happy and content with what their parents were happy with, which is building a house, having a business. For a first-generation refugee, that's a very, very big achievement. That's why I was interested to see what this second generation want to explore. They have bigger dreams. They are not happy with just these four walls and this security and safety. They want to pursue a career. They want to have a life that everyone is deserved to have and a bright future. And that's how I met Taghi, and at the same time, I was also introduced to the community that you see in The Forbidden Strings, which is the film I produced and played out here last year. And in the beginning, I used your question to go how I met protagonists.
I like that. You basically don't need me.
Yeah, I can go on.
And I'm like listening, and I'm like, oh, that's so interesting.
But interrupt me whenever you want.
I will. No worries.
And then I went to University of Tehran to meet students because I knew that there's this law that once they study and they have their qualifications, they are not allowed to stay in Iran and work based on their qualification, which is very absurd.
There I have a question in between. Yeah. So they're allowed to study. So the Iranian country, government, pays for their studies, but then doesn't use their qualification.
They do pay for their education themselves. So, for example, I can go to University of Tehran if I pass the exam for free, but Afghans who are born and raised in Iran, they have to pay a tuition fee as a foreign student. And then once they finish, they can't get any sort of work permit. Even if you have a PhD in law, you can only practice 30 kind of manual labor jobs, like, for example, tailoring, what parents do. So for me, it was interesting that they go to university, some of them, and they pay, but then they know that they can't do anything with that degree in Iran. So there should be something behind this motivation. Either they want to go to Europe, to other countries, or they want to go back to Afghanistan. So I was particularly interested in those who want to go back to Afghanistan. They've never seen their homeland, and they go through all these very difficult steps to finish their degree, and then go to a motherland, which is not famous for being a very peaceful place, right? Probably like the most dangerous part of the world currently.
Especially now, I think it's different in your film.
Yeah.
It's like before the current catastrophe. But are many young people, to your observation, going back?
Or what?
Are there more Afghans, young Afghans, who are going back, who were going back? Is it difficult work in that context?
At the time they were, because we see in the film that there's this scene that the students, well, it's sort of something which is on Iranian TV, like national TV, which is encouraging students to go back to Afghanistan. That's also part of, it's not like something, it's part of a propaganda as well. But then at the time they used to go to Afghanistan, but now I'm sure no one would be willing to go back because, I mean, no way with the return of the Taliban. So I met Taghi at the University of Tehran, and in the beginning I was planning to do something with the students, like have multiple students who want to go back to Afghanistan. But then he simply invited me home to meet his family and to have dinner with them, or lunch maybe. Yeah, lunch, it's like 4 or 5 years ago. And then I was like, okay, I'm not gonna miss this place, this house, the architecture of this house, this family, 3 floors, 3 generations. And it gives me such a powerful context to tell not only the story of the second generation, which is my protagonist, but also dig a little bit more with first generation and also third generation. For first generation, this is a secure house. They're very proud. The parents are proud of what they've achieved. Even in their community, they're very respected because through labor job, they managed to build this house, have this tailor shop, they have no economic problem, and it's a very big family. For second generation, not the same. They don't want to stay in this house. It's a very sweet place, but they don't want to spend their lifetime there in that tailor shop. And for third generation, it's a totally different story because they are treated like prince and princess. They are very loved, very cared for. And then as soon as they step out of that house, they start to realize, okay, I'm different with others, and then all these questions that start rising. So it gave me a very good context to somehow follow the story of the Taghi, but also give a more probably like global image of what this family and what different generations of a refugee family can go through, which I believe, regardless of the law in Iran, that's something that could be, we could treat it as something more universal. I think this can be anywhere in the world, but with different probably regulations.
I think I agree on that. I think the regulations just intensify the situation of the second generation. Yeah. Because not being allowed to work in what you're having studied is heartbreaking. I want to ask the audience if there are any questions for now. Please just go to the microphone directly in front of you. Yeah, and just speak in it. Thank you.
So I just wanted to appreciate, it was a very, very amazing film, as much as I could see through my flood of tears, because it was so close to my feelings as an immigrant living in Germany, and I'm working with the refugees, so I really could connect to all the moments that you pictured in the film. It was amazing, this family. I even cannot imagine through which kind of hardships you went. I mean, in terms of technicalities, just to film in Iran, in this house with the regulation, the family being traditional and religious, and then going to Afghanistan. I think you went through a huge amount of hardship doing the film. And I even cannot find words to appreciate what you did. And now, in the light of what is happening right now in Afghanistan and this horrible, horrible, horrible story of this Taliban getting back to power, and all the world is just watching and just feeling sad and doing nothing. I mean, I cannot even find words to appreciate what you did. Thank you.
So
Thank
much.
you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
That's
For sharing your thoughts. Thank you.
I would use your statement to form a question out of it. It was just mentioned that you filmed in the house in Iran, but also in Afghanistan. So what was the most intensive scene? And were there challenges while filming? Because I remember in the last film you produced, The Silhouettes, they also go to Afghanistan to play at the concert.
Strings, yeah.
And there is this intense scene at the border.
Yeah.
So how was it this time, crossing the border and going there and filming?
Everything we see from Afghanistan is shot by Taghi. I actually never left their home to film. Even throughout the filming, I was very much thinking that I won't show anything from outside this house, that everything we see should be through the screens, television, so as if like we are inside this very sweet prison, this very small Afghanistan that they've built for themselves. But then with my editor, we decided that we see some scenes of Tehran, and he was like, you're not gonna suffocate your audience by staying inside this house. They need to like see a little bit of the sky as well. And it's good because we only go out only with Taghi. He's the one who takes us to school. He's the one who takes us to tailor shops. So he is the one who wants to leave this house. So then metaphorically, I thought, okay, we're allowed to go out. But then, even for Afghanistan, I used your question to talk about, I even didn't know that I'm going to use those images that you see, like Kabul and when Taghi is in Afghanistan. I didn't have the plan, and I didn't even ask him to film anything. But then I did ask him to send videos to his family. So there's this scene where they reconnect to their family members in the village that they haven't seen for over 30 years. And they weren't in touch because they did not have internet there. So there was no way for them to connect the way we connect with our relatives elsewhere. And through the videos he started sending to his family, I was like, wow, these are very, very beautiful material. Especially the first one you see where he makes this selfie video of himself. He's like turning around in Bamiyan. And for me, it was very, very symbolically speaking because he was finally the center of his world. Yeah. He owned the space. He owned the nature. And the poem, which is also on that scene, is something that he's written himself that we wanted to use because it's also the emotions that he's been experiencing. And we decided with the editor, okay, so through the window that he is experiencing Afghanistan and showing it to his family, then we as audience also, we can experience Afghanistan the same way. It can be the Afghanistan that he constructs based on his experience. It does not necessarily stand for all the realities there, but I think that was a very small, interesting window to look at his experience through his own eyes and writings.
If we are talking about him, did he see the film yet? Yeah. And the family? And how they give you really lots of space in their family life. So how was their reaction on it?
Well, it was very interesting because I was very sensitive and even very afraid because usually people seeing themselves, especially after years, this film, like the shooting took exactly 3 years, and people either they love seeing themselves on screen or they hate it. I mean, people have different reactions. So apart from that, I was also a little bit worried because they say things in front of the camera that maybe they are not happy to be screened. So it was very important for us that before picture lock, we show it to them and make sure that everyone's happy. it went obviously very well, and like the issues I had was around, yeah, maybe like our house is not clean enough, oh, I don't look good enough. And then I had this very interesting remark from the mother saying, like turning to Taghi and asking him, should I know that you were sick only through the film after a year? Because there's this scene that he says that he's been sick drinking tap water. And eventually I had this very nice comment from the father saying that for him this looks like an album of the past 3 years of his life, because they've always been wondering what the hell exactly she's doing. She's just filming us eating, filming us praying, like it's never ending. What the hell are you doing? But now I see, okay, there's something, and it's like a video album.
So are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, please, just take the opportunity in the microphone.
Yeah, thanks a lot, first of all. I would be curious to know how the images were created. Was it more like you giving instructions or like actively framing the family? Or was it more like that you stayed with them for longer durations and then from time to time, more like an outside observer, started shooting?
Okay. Like the cinematography is a bit my style. Even before this film, that's like how I film. I tend to stay in a place for a long time, observe, and then be with my camera as well. So people get to used to see me and my camera at the same time. So this me and my camera, we become one single entity. So at some point they start forgetting it, which also helped me to, for example, film children or, so they don't look at the camera. So that's a little bit my style, like observational style, being in a place and like finding the frame I want. But particularly with this family, especially with children and also with the parents, I could not at all ask for anything, because as soon as you ask something, then they become very conscious about the camera, and then it changes the whole natural look and natural dynamic that you look for as a filmmaker. But then with my younger protagonist, with Taghi and his sister, obviously I asked them to go stand by the window so I can shoot them from the building in front, or like I asked them to do things. But that's mainly for the moments where I need to get this extra feelings, because I was like constructing a little bit this idea of wanting to connect Taghi and Zahra once he's away. So I needed to construct some spaces that allow us to go out and come in through the sound as well, and through their looks and through their gestures, standing by the window, standing by the door, by the gate, like always a place which is like a border, you know, between inside and outside. These are the times that I asked my protagonist to do something. But then for the rest, for the dialogues and conversations, it's not that I don't believe in policing in documentary, because there are people who say, oh no, you should not interfere at all. It should be like 100% the reality. I do not necessarily believe in that. But in this film, I realized that if I want to interfere, then it, again, has an impact on the conversations as well. So quickly I realized that I have to let conversations go on by themselves. But I would ask my protagonist, he was my complice as well before the film, because he was very enthusiastic about the whole process, something that helped me as well to make this film in that house. I would, for example, tell him, whenever you want to talk about going to Kabul, let me know before. Whenever you want to do this, let me know before, so I make sure that I'm there at the right time and my camera is there. Because I live in France myself, I couldn't be there every day. So we had to plan shootings based on the subject matter and based on my availability to be able to go to Iran and to film. So it was more of a, there was this collaboration between us. But then as for the filming itself, the camera itself, it comes from being there for a long time. And I would shoot like an hour per day, but then stay there like the whole day, just observing to find the moment and the frame that I need.
So how often did you go back and forth between Iran and
all in all, I had like 40 days of shooting, which is not much for a documentary, but spread throughout 3 years. I can say like every 2-3 months, I would spend a month in Iran.
And I mean, we had that conversation before, but of course that's always like something that interests me. How is your protagonist doing? How is he? I mean, he went to Afghanistan. Yeah. Obviously, I hope he is not there anymore.
Yeah, he went, as you see in the end of the film. But like second time when he went, of course, with a more clear vision of where he's going. So you don't see that, because in the beginning he's very sure of himself. He's even a little bit arrogant towards his parent by wanting to go. But when he comes back, I use your question also to talk about the fact that when the bomb explodes, for me it's also all that imagination of Taghi that explodes, of this fatherland and all the possibilities he could have. So when he returns, he's a different person. He has a better idea of his fatherland, and of course he goes back with a more realistic vision. He stayed there for 1.5 years, if I'm not mistaken. He worked for a company. He was vice president of a company, insurance company, and then he was even sending money to home. He was having good pay, but then he realized that the company was very corrupted and apparently involved in money laundering, so he had to resign. And then he worked as translator for NRC in the ERC, which are also NRC your sponsor in this festival. Yeah.
In particular, which I thought when you were telling the story, absolutely beautiful, that NRC, the Norwegian Refugee Council, is the partner of your film screening, like last year of the Silhouettes, in particular because they were and are working in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And so I think there's a beautiful connection.
That's an interesting link. Yeah. But then eventually he couldn't stay in Kabul. Life was very difficult, and around 1 year ago he returned to Iran, so he's currently in Iran. And even if he had the minor idea of going back again, I think it's gone now. He won't be going there anymore. And he's in Iran now. He speaks very good English, and I'm trying to push him to apply for a PhD in Europe. So maybe he could come, continue his study here, work here. But I can also understand that for him it could be difficult to once again move, go to a new place, find your own community, find a new sense of home. That's not something that you can always go through, especially when you're at a certain age. Like, you're not young to just create everything from scratch. So we'll see. But I think for him, for a talented person as he is, that would be good if he continue his path also for his career, and we'll see what happens to Afghanistan.
It sounds like a beautiful idea, but I can relate to what you're saying. I mean, he was searching for his home country, and then he's leaving the home that he would be leaving the home that he knows to even another place. That must be also very hard. Yeah. So, are there more questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Hi. I very much enjoyed the delicacy of the human connections and how you captured them. But the other point on what is quite a complex topic, how was the movie received in Iran?
Thank you so much. I was very hesitant because I didn't know how it will be received, because the issues which are spoken in the film, they are not only concern the cultural racism, but the film also talks a little bit about the systematic discrimination and the systematic racism. So I wasn't really sure, but to be honest, when I started making this film, my target audience were Iranians. I knew that I'm making this film. Well, Iranians and any people in any country which somehow receives refugees and immigrants, the host societies, not refugees themselves. So I tried a lot to play a little bit with nuances and create some sort of nuances that does not make the film banned from being shown in Iran. It was very important for me that I can get the permission to show the film. And I have scenes and I have conversations that I had to remove by myself because I thought, okay, this is going too far and this is going to endanger the life of the protagonist and also the film. But still, I wasn't always very sure if it's going to be received or not. But I'm very happy to say that I could show it in our 2 major film festivals in Iran. It even received nominations, and the pandemic, among a million negative causes it had, at least for this film in Iran, it was good because the festival was online and many people around Iran could watch it. It could go everywhere, and it really democratized the access to the film. And I received good feedback from people. Well, if there's any negative feedback, people don't write to you. They never tell you, oh, I hated your film. But those who liked it, they wrote to me, and it was interesting. And I was happy because there aren't many films made about Afghan communities in Iran, especially a film that can somehow show the reality a little bit from their point of view. Again, I'm Iranian, I'm not Afghan, so still I have my own judgment and my own perspective as a non-Afghan filmmaker. But I'm happy in general that both the silhouettes and the film, which was released last year, they could somehow contribute to a bit of a dialogue between Iranians and Afghans.
And I think that's the beauty of documentaries, to be a conversation starter. Yeah. In that sense, it was lovely talking to you now. We have to change, we have to leave the stage because the next film is about to start. Yeah. But 2 announcements. We are very lucky that we are allowed to show the film online until October 3rd on our partner platform Suna. So in case you want to recommend the film, that's a beautiful thing to do. And then I hope we see you back next year with a new film.
Oh, wow. I hope so. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching the film.